Hello everyone, welcome to Micro Minute. My name is Marty Jobson and today, under the microscope, I thought I'd put some of this stuff. This is a fern, obviously. Now, ferns are fascinating. I've always actually had a rather soft spot for ferns. They're rather overlooked members of the plant kingdom. Now, they belong to a group of plants called pteridophytes, and often actually with especially with botany and plant science, there are a lot of very specialised words for the specialised bits. And the reason why people don't tend to know those words is because they don't look at them. So I thought we'd have a look at some of the funky bits on ferns. Now, ferns, so as I say, pteridophytes, they evolved something like 400 million years ago compared to flowering plants, which only evolved 250 million years ago. Now, you might think that means they're not very evolved. Far from it. They are perfectly evolved for what they want to do. Ferns can be divided into a few categories. You've got undivided ones, pinnate, bipinnate, and tripinnate ferns. So basically what this comes down to is the structure of the frond, this bit here. So an undivided fern just has the central midrib, the rachis as it's called, and then a leaf essentially around that. And the hart's tongue fern in the UK and in Europe is the common undivided fern that you will see. They're fairly straightforward. They just look like leaves, basically. Then you have bipinnate ones, which have the rachis, and then sticking off the rachis are lots of little leaves, or pinna. And the common one, and then there's something like, what's a common one of those? I'm just going to check my guide. I tend to use a guide when I've got ferns. I've got this thing here. This is the Field Studies Council Guide to Ferns. It's particularly good. The hard fern, that you see that often in woodlands in the UK. That's a bipinnate. This is, a pinnate. This is bipinnate fern. That means it's got rachis, pinna, and then it has pinules sticking off it. So you can see, if I heard it, it's got these little bits sticking up. Let's put it under the desk camera. Show you the desk camera. So you've got there the rachis, which is this bit here. Ooh, I don't want to use that. I'll use this. This is the rachis here. Then you've got the pinna, which is sticking off, and then each of these pinna has individual. Where are we? We're here. Individual pinules on it, and then and that's what this one is. This is bipinnate. It's actually Dryopteris filix-mas, the common male fern. They're actually really difficult to identify. You need a microscope because you need to look at what's on the back of the ferns. Just before I go on, tripinnate ferns, bracken is tripinnate. So you have the rachis, pinna, pinules, and then pinnulets, just so you know. So flipping over, what have you got on the back? You've got all this sort of weird brown fuzzy stuff that you've probably seen on the back of ferns before. And these are where the spores come from. This is how the fern produces the next generation. Let's stop talking and get it under the microscope. Here we go. And actually, I've got too much. I'm going to have to just snip it off there. Cut a little bit off. I'm going to leave that like that. And we'll pop that under the microscope there. I'm just going to get it in a good position. That's pretty cool. Let's have a look at that. There we go. So there you go. That's what the fern looks like underneath the microscope. I'm going to turn it round that way so that we can sort of see more of it. And you can see sort of right to the tippity tip. There's the very tip of the fern. But we're just going to focus in on these bits here, because on the back of the fern, you've got these strange. So here are these are the pinules here. So individual pinules. Okay. There's the rachis, pinna sticking out, and pinules. These little kind of blobby bits, okay? The little green blobby bits. And on the back of each pinule is one sori, okay? And the sori are the little brown dots. And the sori are protecting the sporangia, which contain the spores. Oh, there's so many different words. Basically, you need to know the spores are inside the little blobs underneath these little kind of C-shaped covers. Let's zoom in a little bit. Go right in on this. Now, this is actually quite a mature one. I was hoping to find a slightly younger one, but this one is quite mature. And what I wanted to show you was, I'm going to zoom in on this one here. You can see, and hopefully I turn up the light nice and bright. So this one this is the sporangia, so this is where all the little spore capsules are, and each of these little blobbies here, okay, are spore capsules, and I've zoomed not quite all the way in. I can go in a bit further, okay, so you can see the individual spore capsules, and those individual spore capsules, these ones are actually spent spore capsules. The black ones, so there's one here, these ones here, have still got spores in. The sort of the lighter coloured ones have thrown their spores away. Ooh, look, there's a little mite that's just crawled across the screen for us. Isn't that lovely? No idea what that is. A little mite. So, these have lost. You'll notice that if I sort of zoom out a little bit, most of them have got these protective covers on here. These ones have lost them, so I'll zoom into them because that's more convenient for us. But each one of these little capsules is quite fascinating in itself, because each of these little capsules, can you see it? Almost looks like it's got a little worm running down its back. And that's not a worm, that's what's called the annulus. And it's a series of individual cells with very thick walls. And the annulus is like a spring, because this capsule, let's see if I can find any that have split that we can see. I'll just zoom out, because there's one there that we can see in a bit more detail. If I just focus on that there, can you see that there? This one here, here's one that has opened and split open, and there's the annulus. And basically what you have is you have two cups like this, and they're joined by this annulus that runs around them, and the annulus is a spring that holds them in the position they are now, and they're kind of held together a little bit by their own sort of, by the two cups are sort of stuck together slightly. And basically when it gets to be absolutely ripe and ready to spread the spores, what happens is the annulus begins to dry out, and as it dries out, these individual cells, because each one, the light bits between each of these little stripy things along here, each one of those is a cell, that dries out, and the whole thing, the annulus begins to bend backwards, and the whole thing bends and it twists itself until it is sort of literally flat, at which point there is a huge negative pressure in those cells, and the cells undergo something called cavitation. And when they cavitate, tiny little bubbles of, it's actually water vapour, form inside the cells, which releases the pressure. And as soon as the pressure is released, the annulus snaps back shut. But what happens is it opens it out, the spores end up here and here in the cups of my hand, and then as it snaps back, the spores are thrown in either direction violently, and sort of they get spread far and wide, and then they get picked up by the wind. And in fact, all these little black dots which you can see here, these are spores, and each one of those will go on to create a new plant. Actually, it's a bit more complicated than that. Ferns are very complicated. It goes on to create what's known as a prothallus, which is just a little gobbet of greenery, a little splat of green, and then it creates male and female gametophytes, they're called, and they're actually, the male ones swim, they're motile, so they move of their own accord, and they swim over to the female gametophytes, fertilise them, and then you get the sporophyte generation, which is what becomes the fern itself. So it's a hugely complicated, so fern sex is incredibly complicated. What I wanted to show you, but I'm not seeing, is some of these things in action. This one is mostly spent, unfortunately, because sometimes, just have a look at this. Yeah, this one is actually has spent. It's shot out all of its spores that it's going to shoot out. But sometimes when you get one that's just at the right phase, you can see the spores kind of flying out all over the place. So it's a shame we haven't got one of those. It's a little bit late in the season. I should have come to this earlier. I thought to myself, I must look at some ferns. I left it too late. But I'm going to end. Let's find a nice, just a nice section of sporangia to show you. Let's get them lined up nicely like that, so that we can see them all in focus. It's very important to focus. Bring it down a squeak. That's it, there, like that. As I say, always been a huge fan of ferns. There's something beautifully, they're so complicated and they're so difficult to identify. It's a real challenge. You have to really kind of work at it. So it's quite pleasing when you can say to yourself, yes, I've worked out what this particular fern is. I've identified it. Does that make me very geeky? Probably. Anyway, thanks go to Zeiss, as always, for providing me with these fantastic cameras, fantastic microscopes and cameras, so I can show you all this fantastic, lovely biology and zoology and material science as well. If you want more microscopy, go to my YouTube channel, which is immediately below me now. It's very simple. It's youtube.com/MartyJobson. You will find all microminutes there, and now we are approaching 40 microminutes, each one 10 minutes long. So that's 400 minutes of me talking about microscopy for you. How much more do you need? I don't know. More, always more. Follow me on Twitter. They go live. These microminutes always go live on Twitter first, so that's the best place to catch them. With that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy it, and next time you look at a fern, take a look at the back and see if you can see any of the sporangia and see what state they're in. Bye-bye.